Water brushes. They are quite new invention which came in existence probably almost 20 years ago. They are used for watercolor painting, and their major benefit is that instead of having a pot with water and traditional brush like this, both of those fit into this, which is water brush. At the top, there is this barrel which contains water, which can be unscrewed, filled up anytime you run out of it, and then screwed back and used as reservoir which feeds the top of the brush. Depending on the design, those brushes can have either this push button, which allows for very rapid release of water, or be without that button, which is the case where the brush has flexible barrel, which is more flexible and allows to gently push, and that way you will release very controlled amount of water, which is great if the brush is small for very tiny, teeny details. Now there's some learning which helps to really embrace use of water brushes for all common watercolor painting needs. For me personally, I like to use water brushes when I travel. That is my number one tool, and number one tool for probably all artists on the go. Especially when I travel on the plane or when I hike and go far away, then carrying the water container and large quantity of water with me becomes constraining. Instead, I can have very small amount of water and water brushes and be all ready and equipped to paint. How to use water brush for all major watercolor painting techniques. The very first is how to change between two different colors when you don't have reservoir with water to wash your brush into. And with water brush, it is extremely easy. You just need a piece of napkin, fold it to be thicker, and then if you, let's say, paint with one color, let's choose something really, really dark, for example, black here. And then you can paint with it, and you can see that as you move on, the amount of paint is already deposited, and as you move on further and further, there isn't much to it. It very easily cleans the brush just by dabbing it on the napkin. Now I can take something, let's say yellow, which would get right away contaminated if I go from black to yellow. And you can see here that this yellow is really brilliant. It is strong and it doesn't have any trace of black in it, which allows very quickly to change from one color to another. For example, now, if I go from yellow to blue and the brush is not cleaned well, I should be getting greenish version of blue. But in this case, if I go and take, let's say, this phthalo blue, I'm getting beautiful, clean phthalo blue without any trace of yellow in it. And now, let's say phthalo blue is very staining color. If you have it on your brush, or phthalo green, you know that it is going to take a while to get that out. Now, those water brushes are made to have high resistance to staining. So from this phthalo blue, I can easily go back to yellow and not have creation of green. You can see it's very clean yellow. So changing from one to another color with water brush is a breeze. It is very, very, very easy to do. If I'm to do that with traditional brush, I would need container. I would need to have my brush, which, depending how big it is, it can absorb a lot of paint. And I will have to go from, let's say, this dark, which I put here, discharge. Now I will have to wash all that, which, as you can see, takes time. Then dab it, then have good amount of water, which I need, and then go to another color to obtain the same result, to have that yellow clean without any presence of black. And as you can see, it took longer time, besides the fact that I used more water, and very soon this water will become muddy and I will have to replace it. With water brush, that's not the case. You always have clean brush just by dabbing a few times on the napkin and moving to the next color. The next is how to create various painting techniques, such as wet in wet, wet on dry, soft edges, hard edges, how that works with a water brush. In case you would like to have wet in wet, usually those round brushes are not the most convenient for that, because they are pointy and you still can use by pressing and then getting this side of the brush to wet the whole surface. But more convenient brush is the version which contains flat tip. There, this brush can be very quickly used to wet large areas. If you're working on skies or any of that, you can very quickly wet this whole area and then just add the color which you like. Let's say if we are painting sky and you would like to have something bluish at the top, and then let's say you want to have some yellow ochre at the bottom if it's sunset, then you just mix those colors, and that will create beautiful wet in wet graduation from one color to another. So it's very quick. That's the point, that if you're traveling, time is very scarce, and anything which can be done quicker is certainly highly beneficial. If I want to add smaller details here, let's say I want to create some sort of purple clouds in between with some maybe dark purple blue undertone, I can certainly add that, and it's still creating very nice, beautiful, hazy transition between colors. Or let's say I want orange somewhere at the bottom. It's still wet, it's still beautiful, and very quickly you can paint something outside, which is maybe just a moment in front of your eyes, and the next moment will not be there, like those special light effects during thunderstorms. For that, this tool is really amazing. Now, when it comes to painting details, for example, if I want to paint something to start with as wet in wet, let's say I want to have a surface which is wet and I intend to paint flowers. So I will start adding some yellow color to make the base for it. Then if I want to add something in the center and then have soft transition between that center and the other elements, I can do that quickly. Add a little bit dark red there. That's perfect. And now I can play with the edges to add transition between various petals, for example, if I want that to be soft. And as you can see, the water brush very quickly allows to do all this while the paper is still wet and allows you to create soft transition in between. Now, as the paper dries, having extra water in the brush will actually cause blooms. And in order to prevent that, you would dry your brush and then have very little water on it. Barely any. Just enough to grab the paint you want. Let's say if I want to pick some purple color here, I will take a small amount of water and then be completely in control how far that paint flows, which allows for great amount of details. Like here. The paper is still wet, so this all creates that damp effect, but it allows for very quick and controlled painting. For example, now this is still getting wet, but you could add details as the whole paper and amount of water dries, all the way till you feel that you can't paint anymore because the paper dried too much and it's going to cause problems if you continue. This way, in one go, you can very quickly move from haze and wet in wet edges into something which is more soft, more defined, and more refined. All with just using maybe one or two water brushes. For very fine details and very small paintings, you can use a brush which is very fine, like this Stedler, which has a really, really tiny, teeny, pointy tip for very, very fine lines. Now for wet and dry, for example, painting technique, you can certainly just dab the brush into paint, take as much as you need, and paint. With that, you can certainly accomplish any desired shade because the edges will be pretty defined and sharp, just because the paper is dry and the brush itself contains modest amount of color and moisture. Once you need to change the color, you take another color and do the same. Paint anything you would like around that. For example, if I want tallow green, all of those colors are very staining and they would have heavily impacted the other color if this wasn't nicely cleaned. But water brushes are really easy to clean. They very easily release the paint, even if it's staining, and allow for very nice and soft transition. Now in this case, for example, this flower already dried significantly, and in this case you can start adding some other wet on dry details. For example, if I want certain elements to be more yellow, I can start adding. It's still damp, but it allows for fine control where you can add details without causing any backgrounds still, because the paper is still wet. That way, you can easily control your painting from the beginning till the end. How it looks like, how the edges look like, how soft or hard it is, which makes painting outdoors really, really convenient by using water brushes, because it's pretty easy to do all this. Let's demonstrate how water brush can be used in the real painting. Here I have a painting I'm currently working on, and I will take a medium-sized water brush, small to medium, and small size as well. So this one is medium and the other one is small. So in this case, let's say I would like here to create this part of the painting where I have some greenish components here, and then I have some other components which are more or less red. So here is my paint, and I can now choose the color I want to work with. For example, in this case will be something which is grass green. Now I change the color. I want it to be slightly darker at the tip, and then slowly transitioning into red. So as you can see, the control is very, very fine. Now I want to soften this bottom edge. I will take a clean brush and use it to absorb this extra paint, which I don't want to have there. And now I can move to complementary color, which is in this case red, which I need to have in this area, and say, okay, fine. Now I can go and continue painting this in that other desired color, which is red, without having any contamination with what's left. And any other details which I need to add, or if I need, for example, here, I want to have a little bit wet in wet. So I'm pre-wetting paper, pressing the button to release a little more paint, and then adding this red to that, because that's the how color would look like. Now as it dries, I can add details should I need to. For example, if I need a little bit darker red, I can add that while the whole area is still wet, and that way I will get that desired effect of darker color below these other colors which are surrounding it. And as you can see, very quickly you can start creating interesting shapes, interesting elements into your painting, which slowly starts to look like three-dimensional painting due to presence of light and shadow areas and various values which complement the existence of color by itself. So in those instances, as you can see, I can go around and have very, very fine control if I want to, or paint pretty freely and have soft edges, again, if I choose so, all by using just water brush, going around the edges and transition from one color to another color becomes a breeze in the world of watercolor. So hopefully this short demonstration is helpful to you, and hopefully you will find that owning one or more of watercolor brushes will help you to paint more and paint in circumstances and surroundings when otherwise you wouldn't be able to, which is the main benefit of owning water brush. Thank you for watching. Have a great day and see you in the next video.